Professor Mazari is going to talk about 5-watt approach, and then we'll have a discussion. Okay?
All right. So, Professor Adrish asked me to give a talk as part of this particular course. And so he suggested that I talk about flexible electronics, the area in which I work. But then I think I've given that particular talk a number of times. There is a course on flexible electronics, so I've just finished, giving an introductory talk on that. And and he also said most of the students are not from microelectronics stream. So I thought, well, that flexible electronics lecture is available on YouTube. Anybody who wants can listen to it. So let me talk about, this is something, since this is a seminar course, so each one of us have our ideas on how to give a good seminar, how to present our ideas. Not just a seminar is one forum where you're presenting your ideas. When you write a thesis also, you're presenting your ideas in a written form. So whenever you're presenting your ideas, how should you do that? What are the things that you should keep in your mind, right? And teaching also, is when we teach, we are also presenting our ideas to a group of students. So there are some things that can be helpful if you keep these in your mind, right? This is what I share with my students when they're writing the thesis or they're making a presentation. I tell them to follow. It can be helpful if they follow this. 5-watt basically refers to 5 questions that they should try and answer as part of the presentation, as part of the thesis, as part of the presentation. All right, so one of the first rules for a presentation is that you should spend time preparing the presentation. So I'm violating the first rule of that. I didn't spend enough time. I didn't get enough time, so I couldn't do a very good job of putting together. But hopefully, what I say will be helpful to you. All right, so, when I was a young person, I joined at the age of 27 to 28 years as a faculty in this particular institute. And I was going for my first class, the first big class, which is E210. At that time, it had a registration of around 100. So this is the advice that I got from one of the senior professors. Professor Sharon, who was a colleague whose office was next to mine. And so as I was going for my first lecture, so he told me that, remember this, that if you want to teach mathematics to John, you have to know mathematics and you have to know John, right? So this is what he said. You are going for your first lecture for E210 is a semiconductor device and circuits course. He said, I know you know devices and circuits. You know them very well. You've just finished your PhD and this thing. But remember, to teach well, which is basically to present your ideas well, you have to know your semiconductors and devices and all that, but you have to know your audience, right? And so this is an advice that I always at least attempted to keep in mind. So what he was basically talking about in a more technical phrase is, he's saying cultivate cognitive empathy. Empathy, as all of you know, is like ability to feel what others are feeling, ability to see what others, the way they view a particular topic or a world, the ability to see that, putting yourself in their shoes is what we call as empathy. And many people are basically saying empathy is like a superpower. If you have empathy, you would succeed not just in communicating, as I will just show, but you will succeed in interpersonal relationships and many other aspects, right? So it is empathy, and whole books have been written on this empathy here, right? So here we are talking about a specific dimension of empathy, which is cognitive empathy. Cognitive, as you know, is related to knowledge and knowing things here. So what we are saying is cognitive empathy means putting yourself in others' shoes, seeing things from their perspective. And this is key to communication. This is key to presenting your ideas to an audience here. Now, it's very easy to say, put yourself in other person's shoes, right? For example, if I'm a teacher, put yourself in students' shoes, right? Well, in some aspects, we are all students, we continue to be students, but then the semiconductor devices and circuits, for example, I've been teaching it for 30 years, right? And now you tell me to put yourself in students' shoes, right? It's very hard to view, for me, to view semiconductor devices and circuits from a student's shoes. I've lived with that particular material for 30 years, right? So how do I put myself in students' shoes? So this is what is called as the curse of knowledge. Knowledge, of course, is very beneficial. We all know that, but there is a curse of knowledge when it comes to teaching and presenting your ideas or in communicating. There is a nice thesis that was written in 1990, a thesis in the Department of Psychology by this person called Elizabeth Newton. So this is a PhD thesis, and the title of it is A Rocky Road from Actions to Intentions. Right? This thesis is available on the web. Those of you who are interested can download and read it. Why it is important is this lady, she did a few experiments, and one of the experiments is very nice, which illustrates the curse of knowledge. That when you know something, what the curse of knowledge basically means is once you know something, it becomes difficult not to put yourself in a frame of mind of those who don't know. Which means that once you know something, it's very hard to develop that cognitive empathy. Very hard to view things from those who don't know. But as I said, that's key to communication. You have to know, you have to view things from the other's perspective. And that's very hard, and that's because of the curse of knowledge. So this particular, I didn't know this about, a thesis published in 1990 from Stanford. This particular thesis was made popular by a book called Made to Stick by Chip Heath and Dan Heath. So this is another book that I would recommend to all of you. Read this particular book. This is also Made to Stick, is how to present ideas so that they are sticky. They stick. People remember them. People, once you talk about it, they'll remember it forever, right? How to generate sticky ideas. So this is a very nice book. Chip Heath and Dan Heath, they popularized the work done by Elizabeth Newton, right? So what was that work? So this work was, I tried my hand at ChatGPT yesterday. So I generated this image from ChatGPT. So this lady she did many experiments. And one of the experiments that she did was what is called tappers and listeners. Tappers and listeners. So the idea was in this experiment is, there is this person here, and they had many, she conducted experiments over with many students. So the idea was this particular person would tap a popular tune, like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star or Baba Black Sheep or whatever, some of those tunes that everybody knows, right? So this person would tap a tune, right? Whatever, tap a tune. And on the other side is a person sitting, he or she has to guess what that particular tune is. Right, so that's the experiment that she's doing. And she did it with about 40 pairs of students. One person was tapping and the other person was listening. So and each person, 40 pairs, and each person tapped about 3 songs. Right, so a total of 120 songs were tapped out. And the other person had to guess. Right, and so now the interesting thing was, they asked this person who's tapping, there were multiple people, what do you think is the success rate? How many people will be able to tell what song you are tapping, right? And you collected the data and all that, and they said, I think about 50% of my songs will be deciphered. They will be able to tell that what I'm tapping is Twinkle Twinkle Little Star or Baba Black Sheep or whatever. They'll be able to tell. 50% of the songs will be deciphered, right? Then you run the experiment. So 120 songs were tapped out.
So was the context given which type of song or no?
No, it was given that these are the 25 songs.
Okay.
Right? Everybody knew 25 songs is being taken, right? So 120 songs were tapped out, and then the data was collected, right? How many do you think succeeded?
Very few.
3 out of 120. Which means the success rate was 2.5%. Right? So here is an audience. They could decipher what this guy is tapping out, only 2.5% success rate. And this guy who's tapping out is thinking I've succeeded 50%. right? So this is the dilemma of as a teacher, I'm tapping out, a lecture, right? I'm delivering a lecture. I'm feeling very happy, right? That, the students are going to understand everything. And probably 2.5% of the students are understanding, right? So this is illustrating why is this occurring? Why is this person overestimating that everybody is going to understand what I'm saying? Because when this person is tapping out, there is a tune playing in his head. There's a ba, black sheep and all that, and the tapping and the tune, and he's saying, yeah, it makes sense. There's a tune going on in the head. And the tune is making him think that the tapping is very realistic. But the same tune is not playing in the minds of the listener. The tune is absent. So to the listener, it's just some random series of taps. And they are not able to decipher. So why is the listener not able to decipher the tapping? Because the same tune is not playing in the head of that particular listener. He or she doesn't know which tune, right? So this is the problem. When we are communicating, when you are communicating, let's say you've done your thesis, right? You've lived with your thesis for 1 year, worked with it and all that, your mind is saturated with that. There's a tune playing in your head of the thesis, right? And you are communicating. And you are writing, you're preparing your slides and all that. You're thinking, yeah, everybody in the audience is going to understand. The audience has not lived with that idea for a year. They're not going to understand what you're saying. So this is the problem of your ability to see things from an audience perspective gets impaired by your knowledge now. This is what is called as the curse of knowledge. It's very easy to say, cultivate cognitive empathy. Put yourself in other person's shoes, but it's very hard. It's very hard to put yourself, those who are able to do it, some people intuitively do it. They have that ability, maybe they're born with it and all that, they become good presenters, good communicators. But then some people may not be born with that particular talent. So, but perhaps we can all, if we give attention to this particular fact, that to communicate well, you have to look at things from others' perspective. If you keep that thing in your mind, then maybe each one of us with practice can become better, right? So now, how do you cultivate cognitive empathy, right? So in that respect, I think this idea, the next idea is, okay, so this is what is telling you is what is the success rate and all that, yeah. This is the other book which I would recommend, read this book here, is by Atul Gawande, which is called Checklist Manifesto. So what he's saying is, checklists provide a kind of cognitive net. They catch mental flaws of memory, attention, and thoroughness inherent in all of us. Right? So in many fields, what he's talking about, Atul Gawande is a faculty member and a surgeon in Harvard Medical School. So he does surgery and he writes also very well. So he's written a number of bestsellers here. So what he's talking about is a very simple cognitive aid, which is a checklist, right? We all, many times, when we are pressed for time or whatever, we prepare, we have to do these things. What he's saying is these checklists are a great tool for making sure that we follow a certain discipline, a certain set of rules. And he gives examples from diverse fields. For example, in hospitals, right? Before a surgeon goes and does a surgery, the surgeons are supposed to do a few things. And washing is one of them. Washing your hands properly and for a certain number of, half a minute or 1 minute is an important part. And the way you wash and all that, right? You wash first here and then the reverse side and all that. There's a certain protocol. And so what he was finding is everybody knows. The surgeons know they should wash their hands. And the nurses know that they should wash their hands and do things in a certain manner. So everybody knows, but what he was finding is people don't follow. People don't follow. And once he put it down as a set of checklists and made sure that everybody now goes ahead and ticks, tick, 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 right? Once they did it, they found marked improvement in infection rates and other things in the hospital. There's this particular book will, talks about all those studies that have been done. So in various fields, the doctors, for example, when they go through a checklist, they become much more, the hospitals and doctors become much more, the outcomes are much better. Similarly, pilots, before a plane takes off, they also have a checklist. So they go through, They're very experienced, but they go through everything one by one. They will go through and tick, 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 so that they have gone through the whole series of things. So in that spirit is what I'm talking about is when I say 5 what approach. So I have a checklist of 5 things. So when you are presenting, go through this particular checklist of 5 things and make sure that you go through each one of them. When you're presenting your ideas, when you're writing your thesis, if you go through all 5 of them, it would be helpful for you. Are there other ways of doing it? Of course. I'm just talking about one particular way which I found it useful. So so in my checklist, what are the things? 5 questions that are there. Try to answer those 5 questions when you're presenting your work. So the first thing in my checklist is, what is the problem you're trying to solve and why is it important? Many times what happens is the students will write in one sentence, this is a problem that I'm doing, and not spend enough time in trying to illustrate. Remember, the audience doesn't know. You may know. You have read hundreds of papers, let's say, and lots of things and all that. You may realize, oh, this is a very important problem. But the audience, again, it's all a problem of cognitive empathy. The audience may not know. And if they don't realize that the problem that you're trying to, what is the real problem that you're trying to solve? And why is that an important problem? Right? And there are a lot of people who have said, asking right questions and framing the problem is key to obtaining meaningful results. Right? And this is a famous quote from Einstein, of course. If I were given 1 hour to save the planet, I would spend 59 minutes defining the problem and 1 minute resolving it. They're all illustrating that the question that you are posing, framing, and trying to answer is extremely important. Do not just very quickly talk about what is the motivation, what is the problem that you're trying to solve very quickly, and then go on to the remaining part. Yes, spend some time, right? And in order to illustrate, for example, the problem that you're trying to solve. So when you're doing a thesis, when you're presenting a seminar, often we are talking about a very, very narrow topic, right? The world, the field of knowledge is very, very vast, right? And you're talking about a small, very specific problem, right? A very narrow problem on which PhDs and master's thesis and all that are on a very small, narrow problem here, right? So how do you, and in the audience you have people with diverse background. You're not just giving a seminar to your examiners, right? Even your examiners, except for your advisor, your other examiners also may not know the topic that you're dealing with in that much detail, right? Because the field of knowledge has become so vast that the problem that you're handling, most people would not understand or would not know about that particular problem here. So how do you go about talking about the problem that you're trying to solve and why is it important? So I feel this kind of an approach is helpful here. You start with, what happened? So for example, let me take, to illustrate what I mean by this. So you start from, basically from very general a topic or an area, and then you gradually come down to the topic that you are addressing here. Gradually come down. Why am I saying very general? So when you talk about something which is very general, this is something that the audience will be able to relate to. Again, it's a matter of cognitive empathy, right? So this very general application and all that, so they will be able to relate to this particular part, right? Once they're able to relate, you gradually hold their hands and bring them to the next phase and the next phase and to the problem that you are addressing. So let me illustrate. So in my field, for example, let's say if I were giving a seminar on a method of measurement of contact resistance in thin film transistors using a single device, right? I think nobody in the audience would know, what am I talking about, right? A method of measurement of contact resistance. What is this importance? Contact resistance in thin film transistors using a single device. So how do I convey the importance of this particular topic? So I start from a very general level, right? Very general level. So I talk about display. Everybody can understand the display. You all are familiar with TVs and laptops and cell phones and all that. So I would start with display. Look, display is a very important application area, a very important large market and things like that, right? Then once the audience understands, yes, displays are very important, okay, fine. Then I say, well, if you examine, let's say, this particular display in detail, right? A display is made up of pixels. So once you do that, then you find that this display is organized in the form of a matrix, rows and columns of pixels. And each pixel, if you examine, has a circuit like this. Each pixel is a circuit. There is a transistor here, transistor here. For example, this is an active matrix OLED, AMOLED display here. So there is a organic light emitting diode, there's a capacitor here. So I start from display, I bring them to pixel circuits. Then I say, look, if you want to make a good display, then you have to make these good quality TFTs here, thin film transistors. So from pixel circuit, I come to thin film transistor. Once I come to thin film transistor, now they realize that thin film transistor is a key ingredient of a display, right? Displays are obviously important, and thin film transistor is a very, very important part of this particular display. Now, once my audience is there with me, that thin film transistors are very important, then I go and talk about that. Look, in thin film transistors, if I go inside a thin film transistor, there is not only the channel, but there is this source resistance and drain resistance and all that, right? And the presence of this source resistance and drain resistance is that it reduces current and all that. This particular seminar is not on contact resistance, so I'm not going to go deeper into it. So now your audience will understand, okay, right? So you're talking about contact resistance, and why is this contact resistance important, right? So you gradually start from display, come to pixel circuits, come to TFTs, and come to contact resistance. Now your audience is with you. They know what you're talking about. Why is it important? What is the problem that you're addressing? They know now this particular aspect, right? So that's the first part. Do not very quickly try to, say, oh, this is what I'm working on, and then go on to this thing. Spend some time setting up your problem, right? Framing your problem, setting up your problem. The next part is, what is state of the art? Very seldom you are solving a problem that nobody has really solved, right? Most of the problems that you're going to attack, you're going to look at, lots of people have worked on it, right? And it's important that you talk about what is it that others have said. How have others tried to solve the problem? What are their strengths and shortcomings? It's very important that you do that. Not only a good literature review is what we're talking about, it not only acknowledges contributions of others. Every work builds upon the work of others, and you must acknowledge what others have done. I've seen many times people are presenting their work without acknowledging that huge body of work on which they're doing a little bit of incremental improvement, but they're not even acknowledging properly whose work am I building on, right? So it's very important that you talk about how have others tried to solve the problem. And a good, as I said, and you talk about the strengths and shortcomings. This is also important, not, for people to understand and appreciate the significance of your work. How will they know what you have done? How significant is it? So you take a problem of, let's say, contact resistance, right? And I say, look, these are the different ways in which people have tried to do it. They've tried to measure it in this way and that way and all that, and this is the problem and that is the problem. I talk about it. Then I come to the next part. So what is state of the art? Now people will understand what your contribution is. Once you have talked about others' work, see, the more you talk about others' work, the more people will understand the significance of your work. If you simply talk about, oh, I've done, this, well, the context is not there. How do I judge how important is your work? You've done something, but how important is it? It's only when I talk about others' work, if I lay the background and I tell you this is what the others guys have done, and this is what has been missing, right? So the next thing is, what unique insight is your work based on? Every work, if you're doing something new, and if you're, you feel proud of your work, then it must be based on something new that you have done, right? So what unique insight? Now, note that this unique insight that you have people will be able to appreciate it only if you have already talked about what others have done. These are the ways in which the others have tried to solve the problem. And this is what has been missing. They didn't look at it in this particular way. Now I am looking at this problem in a new way, in this new particular way, right? So what unique insight is your work based on? Now you come to it. This is what my way of looking at a problem is. And note that a new improved solution will only be obtained if it is based on a new line of attack. The problem has been there, other people have tried to solve it, right? You have done your thesis, you've tried a new way of looking at it, new way of answering that particular problem. So you must highlight that explicitly, right? Do not let it be for people for audience to figure out, right? Explicitly highlight what is the unique insight your work is based on, right? So it will help convey the contribution of your particular work. So this is the third item on my checklist. Now, once you have done that, right? Once you have talked about the importance of the problem, once you have talked about what others have done, their strengths and weaknesses, and you have talked about what is the uniqueness of the approach that you are taking, now you come to, for example, in the contact resistance, for example, problem, most people have, so this is a transistor TFT, and most people have looked at this particular TFT and tried to answer contact resistance from the TFT itself. What we have done is, we have put another contact to the left of the TFT. Another contact to the left of the TFT, and this senses the potential here, and from this, by sensing the potential here, we are able to figure out what is the potential here and figure out the resistance that is here. Anyway, it's not important. So what I'm saying is, you need to highlight what is the approach that you're taking now. What unique insight? The unique insight is by sensing the variable here and then using it to calculate what the contact resistance is. So it's a totally different approach. So in that sense, what are the key results of your approach? This is something obvious. This is where students spend a lot of time talking about this is what I've done, that, tabulating all of that. But note that all these things will become much more significant and meaningful if you answer those first three questions. The significance of your result, that is there. The last one, so 4 items are there in the checklist. The last one are, what are the limitations of your approach? So in every thesis, for example, in the end, we have conclusions and future work. And I've looked at, I don't know how many hundreds of theses over this thing. The most poorly written chapter is conclusions also, and future work. Future work is, I don't know what to write future work. Students come to me, they just write 2-3 things and all that future work. In fact, note that every solution has its limitations. Yes, you try to solve a problem, right? Your way of doing it is not the end of it. You have not solved the problem forever, right? A critical analysis of your own work will enable one to improve it further, right? Now, once you've spent let's say a year, let's say if you're a master's thesis or PhD, 5 years that you have, now at the end of it, many times what happens is, now you've developed a good feel for the particular problem. You have a better clarity of the problem and the solution. It would be of great help if this newfound wisdom is documented. At the end of it, you should reflect upon what you have done. And reflection upon what you have done, the problem that you have looked at, the solution that you have tried, once you reflect upon it, now you would see, okay, I tried it in this particular way, but you may find, oh, I wish I had tried this particular way. It should happen to you. Once you have done something, at the end of it, you should be brimming with lots of new ideas. Maybe this could have been done. Maybe I could have done this thing. Maybe I could have done that. Right? Lots of things should be, and that is a program for future research. Right? So, this new wisdom that you have at the end, once you have done your thesis, you understand the problem very well, the limitations of a solution, don't brush it aside. Acknowledging the limitations of your work is not a weakness, it's a strength. Right? So look at honestly what you have done. Instead of all the examiners pointing out all the weaknesses, you yourself look at it and say, yes, these are the limitations. I acknowledge it. But this is the program for nothing is final, right? So this is the program for future research. So often towards the end of a project, one gains better clarity of the problem and the solution. You will note that. Towards the end of the thesis is when you really understand it well, after a year's work. It would be of great help if this newfound wisdom is documented here. Right? So towards the end, for example, if I were doing and you write up a paper and all that, and you realize, okay, what I've done this, some interesting results are there. What is the limitation? Well, one limitation is many of the other methods are very direct in nature. This particular method is based on a model. A particular model, a transmission line kind of a model. This model may or may not be valid. For example, there could be non-uniformities that assumes that all the resistors are the same. All the resistors of the same magnitude. If there's non-uniformity, this resistor may be different from this, may be different from this. And that would cast a problem onto all the, the whole equations and all that you use. Right? So, I mean, it's good to look back, look at what you've done, acknowledge the limitations, and spend some time writing the chapter on future work. Right? All right, so this is my, I think I've taken 30 minutes. So this is the summary of 5-watt approach for presenting over watt. What is the problem you're trying to solve? What is state of the art? What unique insight is your approach based on? What are the key results of your approach? What are the limitations of your work? Right? So this is the checklist that I'm suggesting. Keep these 5 things in your mind. When you're presenting, when you're writing your thesis, try to address all these 5 points. And hopefully your thesis would be better organized and you would be able to communicate things in a better manner.